Hello, and yes, it's still good morning, so good morning, Studio 5 going live. Recently, I've noticed one or two posts in one or two of the Facebook groups that I belong to about, how to trim and what people do for trimming their text blocks. What I'd like to do very quickly is share with you one or two ways of doing it that are extraordinarily low-tech. But first of all, go through sort of alternatives that sort of people do use. We're going to start off with a very simple, if you like, method, which is using a plough. This is a plough here with a laying press, and this is a bench top laying press by a company called, but other ones are available. This is pretty old. Sorry about that. This is pretty old. I've had it since I was a student, and I think I bought it secondhand. So Lord alone knows how old it really is. Basically what happens is you put your work to be trimmed into there, you then tighten it up, and then you move the plough backwards and forwards, incrementally bringing the blade in as you cut. Make one pass, bring the blade back, tighten the blade up slightly, and then bring it in towards you. If you've got one of these, you probably know how to use it. This is a sort of a tabletop model, and this connection. This is a tabletop model, and it's got a beautifully handcrafted tub that it stands on, which again I made in a frantic hurry from wood, and that's from trees of course, and nails, which aren't. But you can buy them with tubs. Now the word tub originates from the fact that the ploughs and the presses and everything else were suspended on an old wooden barrel, like a tub, which would catch all the waste material. Nowadays they're sort of like table legs, or sort of floor. That's a floor standing. Now if you are short of space, what I do is, if I'm using a plough, and this is another press and a plough, is I actually suspend mine over the edge of the bench, clamping in place with some huge C-clamps, and that clears up floor space for me, and that works pretty well, I have to say. Again, this works on the same principle. So basically the work goes in here, tighten up, and then move this backwards and forwards. So that's the traditional, if you like, laying press and plough. Some people refer to them as backing presses, whatever. Now, another variation on this is, of course, the vertical plough. And this is a vertical plough here. Basically, with these, you're working against gravity, because obviously things can drop down here. With this, gravity is on your side, because the work goes in at an angle just into there like that. And then you tighten up the bars and everything else. And again, we've got the shuttle, and you can just make out the blade just there. And that moves backwards and forwards, obviously bringing it down incrementally as you use it. Now, in the sort of the big world, the grown-up world, I suppose we would use guillotine, and there's my little old gilly, and of course a board chopper, and that's my little board chopper. But if you haven't got that, and not everybody does, I must admit, or you don't have access at the moment, what I'd like to do is just show you a couple of very quick methods of doing it. So I'm just going to now get into my Heath Robinson sort of cradle. Rotate. You can't turn the phone while recording. Okay, right, fine, don't worry about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you a couple of techniques, but first of all, what I'd like to do is just talk about trimming the edge of a book. Now what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm just going to fold a section, and folding a section is one of these things that we do automatically. Obviously check that the grain direction is correct and that you've got your tools that you need. So what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm just going to make a section by folding and cutting, make sure everything's in alignment, nice and quick, don't worry about it. Now, we go to all this effort of folding paper, cutting by hand, to make a handmade book. And the amount of times I get students in the studio saying, oh, can we trim the edge? And I'm thinking, why do you want your book to look as if it's been made by a machine? We've gone to all this effort and all this time to make something which is unique, beautifully handcrafted, and you want it to have square edges. I've heard people say, oh, it's because it looks professional. It looks as if a machine's made it. And the reason a machine has to have clean cut edges is because they can't make edges that are uncut, untrimmed. And in fact, a lot of publishers now are trying to produce books that have got this finish to them. Also, what you do get, of course, is you get that beautiful little tab happening there, which holds everything together while you're sewing. And again, I'll just come to this in a moment. That's handmade. If I cut it, it becomes flat and boring. This has got life, it's got feeling to it. So, put that to one side for the time being. I'm going to show you some examples. couple of old poetry books here. Okay, nothing special about them. Okay, but what we can see here, can you just see here we've got this little bit of cord showing through here and here. That's because these boards are laced on. And again, look, if we go back to a couple of days ago when we were talking about board attachment, this is a classic example of that. The important thing to remember is this is a quarter cloth case binding. So it's an interim sort of binding, and it's also a tight back cloth binding as well. Very, very rare to find these, but look at the edge. Can you see? It's been left untrimmed. That's got life, that's got character to it. That's, you know, and this is old, it's been loved, it's been read and everything else, and you can see that in it, and that's the beautiful thing about it. Likewise, again, and I've just highlighted these here. I'm sorry I can't open them up too far. They are rather delicate, as you can imagine. I mean, if I was this old, as old as these books, I think I'd be quite delicate. But we can see here, look, can you see that one's being left completely untrimmed, uncut through? It's in its natural state, and if you're a book dealer, that's what you are looking for. You're looking for a book that's as near perfect as possible, and that gives us some indication of it. So just don't go default, cut the edge. Think about it. Because, for example, we've got here, this is a book, William Morris, and this is beautifully handmade. And this is arguably the epitome of the arts and craft movement. For those of you who don't know about the arts and craft movement, look up arts and craft movement. William Morris was a very, very big name in the arts and crafts movement, arguably the man. Anyway, this is a beautifully hand-printed book on handmade paper. William Morris, an address delivered to the 11th of November 1890 at Kelmscott House, Hammersmith, before the Hammersmith Socialist Society. Now, the Hammersmith Socialist Society is very important within the arts and craft because it was a bookbinder called Cobden Sanderson, who was a member of the Hammersmith Socialist Society, that coined the phrase arts and craft movement. Not a lot of people know that. Anyway, this is printed by the Hammersmith Publishing Society, 7 The Terrace, Hammersmith, 1892. Now, the thing is, that place still exists, and that place still exists, and they're about 15 minutes walk from my studio. That's cool, isn't it? But can you see, look, it's been left untrimmed. It's not trimmed. And look at the beautiful typesetting there. Now, if I was to trim those pages, I'd denature the book. It would be false. It wouldn't be right. So, again, you know, don't trim edges just because you want it to look machine made. And if I may just show you another book. Got a little bit of an old book here. And look, can you see all these edges are untrimmed? Look at that. Beautiful. And if we go to the head, again, untrimmed. And it's a book on bookbinding. I will end just there. Okay? Just my thoughts. I do trim some books, but I don't do it automatically. I like books to be natural. I like to see the beauty of the paper and, you know, the handmade quality of it. A lot of people will trim their books to hide sloppy sewing because the sections are all uneven. Don't trim it. Get your sewing better. Anyway, full stop. Underneath that, moving on. Now, if you do have a section and you are wanting to trim it and you've got no kit, you can make some kit very, very simply. So I'm going to show you what I do. I've got here a bit of shelving from a well-known flat pack company, which I've cobbled together with a piece of wood. This is tree wood, of course, with a cutting mat just there. Okay, this is dead simple, it's dead easy. And you'll notice, to save time, when you're trimming your sections individually, you mark up each one and then you cut, and then you mark up the next one and you cut again, and it goes on and on and on. What I do, if I'm cutting this or I'm showing people how to do this quite, you know, as easily as possible, you'll notice I've got a strip of masking tape just there and a number of lines. Well, this is dead easy, so I've got number 1, 2, 3, and those refer to the order of the cuts. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim a section using this marvellous piece of kit. Okay, cool. Put that down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut at number 1, so I can just line everything up to my mark, which is on the masking tape here. Folded section goes to this pattern here. I know some people call it a, there is another name for it, section. Oh, I forget now, it's not important. I call it a section because I'm from the UK. But then I get my right angle, and what I do is I just butt it up to the edge of the wood here. Then I get my craft knife and I cut like that. So that's the first cut. Start the cutting away from, so the blade is moving already. And of course I slipped because I'm going live. Keep it moving, and basically you're cutting through one sheet of paper at a time. Don't stop until you're sure you've cut through everything. There we go. turn this round, and then I'm going to put it to the second mark. Of course, if you're doing a lot of these, perhaps it's not a mark, maybe it's a block of wood or something that you've secured in place. So that's that. So this is going to be this section cut now. Simple, isn't it? I suppose it's quite meditative. Again, imagine you're cutting through one sheet of paper at a time. That's easy. And then for the third and final cut, to cut that fore edge down, again, line up into position, and you'll end up with something which looks pretty square, neat and dead. Sorry, that's just my... Got to get over this, Mark. You've got to get over some people wanting the books to look machine made. Anyway, moving on. So there we go. So that's that section cut using 2 pieces of wood, a cutting mat, a right angle, and a craft knife. Simple, simple. And you can use this technique for books up to about maybe 3, maybe 4 sections thick, depending on how much practice and how good you are at cutting. Now, that's okay. That's fine. I don't want that. That goes on the floor. What I'm going to do is I'm now going to show you another way of doing it very, very simply, and perhaps a little bit more, how can I say, quicker. Dare I use the P word, professional? I don't know. Now, what I'm going to be using is a finishing press. Now, this is a finishing press. It's basically 2 screws, one at either end, 2 pieces of wood, and the finishing press is generally, it's called a finishing press because it's used by the people who do all the titling and the gold work on books, and you would hold your book in here like that with the spine uppermost, and then you could do all your fiddling around with it. And they're called finishers. The people that do the actual hard work are called forwarders. So now this is a finishing press. They don't cost a lot of money, to be honest, and you can make your own, again, out of 2 pieces of wood and a couple of C-cramps, and that will do the same job. It's a bit more cumbersome, a bit more fiddling around, but it will do the job. The majority of the bookbinding supply companies have these, you know, they're all much of the same. You pay your money, you take your choice. They're not expensive and they will last a lifetime. It is a one-off buy. And trust me, they are extraordinarily useful for marking up your text block, for sewing, for doing small books and pressing. Also, it goes on and on. And I'm going to show you how we can use this press to trim the edge of a book. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it round. So I've got 2 flat surfaces. This is easy, isn't it? I know. I know. It's so easy. What I've got here is a book that I made this morning. It's a small one because, to be honest, I don't want to be doing ploughing an edge all day. And what I've done is I've marked 2 points from the spine to the fore edge, the amount we want to cut off. I've used a biro so you can see what I'm doing, but normally I'd use a pen mark or maybe a very small pencil line. There's no need to draw a continual line along there. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to put a piece of wasteboard behind it, and I'm just going to make sure that the wasteboard is higher than the text block. Okay, I'm now going to put it into the press. I'm gently going to bring my cheeks together, dancing cheek to cheek. Try not to get your cheeks out of alignment. It will make screwing them together a little bit more difficult. And what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to manipulate the section so that I can just, or the text block I should say, so that I can just see those biro lines above my cheek. That's nice, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. So look, you can just see that. I hope that they're just above. That's easy, isn't it? And remember, you can do this with a couple of C-cramps, 2 pieces of wood, you know, or if you know somebody who's handy with woodwork, smile at them. Flutter your eyelashes. It works for me. Now, we're going to start cutting this. The important thing is the choice of blade. Right, now, the secret to this is to use a knife that is beveled on one edge and flat on the other. You could use a woodworking chisel, of course, to do this with. So it's flat on this surface and all the sharpening's done on this side here. And this is a pretty normal sort of paring knife, round-bladed paring knife. Okay, you could, of course, use a flat one. That will do the same job. And I'm going to be using the flat one. Okay. Obviously, make sure that it's nice and sharp. And a good little tip is to ensure that your blade is clean, that the blade is actually longer, wider than the work you do. You don't want to be getting halfway through your text block and finding the blade is too short to do the job. So what I'm going to do is I always pull the blade towards me, laying the blade firmly on top, get cutting, just go down there, and basically, I just want to tighten that up a fraction more. There we go. Squeaky cheekies. And I'm just going to bring the blade along like that. And I'm just cutting one piece of paper at a time. I'm dewing it gently. And as my tutor used to say, she that must be called Duke, it should sound as if a wave is coming onto a pebble beach. That's good. That's nice, that, isn't it? Very poetic. So we can begin to see how that's cutting through. And it's dead simple. You don't need a plough. You don't need to have, you know, a guillotine. They're very, very useful to have. And if you're doing a lot of work, then it's worth the investment. And I know some people saying, well, I can't afford this, I can't afford that. Neither could I. I saved up. I made do and mend. And we can see how that's just trimming through nicely. And you can understand why it's not a thicker book, because I seriously have got things to do today. I don't know what I've got to do today. Every day's a joy, isn't it? And we can see how smooth that's going to be. Glue up your text block, get it nice and square before you do this, obviously. Otherwise, it's going to be a pointless waste of time. And what I tend to do is I tend to put on my first spine lining of tarlatan, mull, whatever it is I'm going to be using, onto the spine, just to make sure that it is going to stay in that thing. Also, keep cleaning the paper away so it doesn't get caught underneath the blade. Nice and gentle with it. Relax. Remember to breathe in and out as you're doing this. I find that helps, to be honest. Don't pull it away. Don't snap it off, because you could actually tear it. So let the blade do the work for you. Now you can see why we have this piece of board here. It's so that the text block isn't being pushed over, and that the knife actually has something to cut into, so that we're getting everything nice and vertical. So again, nice and steady with it. Nice and easy. And that's all there is to trimming the edge of a book using basically 2 pieces of wood, a couple of C-cramps, and a good sharp knife. And remembering to breathe in and out, and that's all there is to it. So I can take this out of here now, if I can get it undone, and you can see that that edge is now perfectly 100% beautifully smooth and machine-like. In fact, it's not machine-like because you've got no score lines from the blade. Anyway, that's edge trimming a text block using simple kit, very available. What more can I say? Thank you all very much indeed. Have a lovely, lovely day. Let's be safe out there. Always wear protection, of course. And I look forward to seeing everybody in the near future. Thank you and goodbye. This is Studio 5 going live.